guys. Welcome back to the Standard of Truth podcast, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. Today, I actually want to talk to you about the Democrats who, y'all, they ain't gonna never learn. They have nothing new under the sun to present to the American people, and they are trying with this one last ditch effort to get in the good graces of Black folks once again. What am I talking about? Well, Ayanna Pressley, in the spirit of Sheila Jackson Lee, rest in peace or power, I don't know how they say it, has recently come up with a new yet old, or should I say repackaged grift. They dangling the carrot in the face of Democrats or the American people once again, or specifically Black people, by trying to introduce HB40. So let me tell you what HB40 is, and then we're going to cut on over to the press conference that explains exactly what the Democrats are lying to the Black American community about now. So, in a press conference, the congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, she reintroduces HR40 again, which is this bill that aimed to establishing a federal commission to examine the legacy of slavery and to develop reparations proposals for descendants of enslaved Africans. Now, this press conference, it featured multiple lawmakers, including several members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And in summary, I'll just put it like this. In summary, they were emphasizing that this is an urgent piece of legislation that we need to put on the forefront of the legislators' minds. And it's because there is ongoing systemic injustice based on race that is trying to erase Black history. And so therefore, this is our solution to do something about it. So let me go ahead and just go over some of the key themes and arguments of HR 40 and why Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley thinks that this is necessary. So she first argues that the impact of slavery, it didn't end with the emancipation, but was codified into laws and policies that created systemic racial disparities in housing, wealth, education, healthcare, and criminal justice. Now, I'm gonna let Ayanna explain what she means by all of this, and then I'm gonna come back and react to it, because there is just so much history that these Democrats forget, and so they can count on me to remind them so that there's no confusion here. But take a listen.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you everyone for braving the inclement weather as we gather to take an essential step forward in the long and ongoing fight for justice, accountability, and healing for Black America. Today, I'm deeply honored to reintroduce HR 40, historic legislation to establish a federal commission to examine the lasting legacy of slavery, to develop reparations proposals for descendants of enslaved Africans. It is an honor to inherit the privilege of carrying this bill forward.
Is she crying? Is she actually trying to drum up some fake tears? Talking about this is an honor? I'm sorry. Listen, these people are so disingenuous, and they are the dramatics, all of the dramotional hoopla that we are about to watch. It should make every Black person feel incredibly insulted. And if you happen to watch this video and you are a liberal that is pro-reparation, now I'm real clear. I'm not pro-reparation. I don't believe that it is necessary. In fact, I believe that we were given our opportunity at reparations, of which I will explain later. Hear my argument out before you dismiss me. But this is just another smoke and mirrors game, because the Democrats don't have anything else. They have no substantive policy. They are really not interested in moving the conversation forward in terms of how to improve the conditions of Black America. In their minds, this is their one-trick pony. But I just wanted to point out these fake crocodile tears and this Oscar award winning performance that just falls flat. But let me let her finish.
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. In my last correspondence with her, she said, keep working on our priorities and never give up. She was the previous House sponsor of HR40 and a true giant in the movement for reparative justice. We are grateful for her leadership. We are grateful for her example and her voice. May she rest in peace and power. And we are grateful to be joined here today by her daughter, former Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter, who today, when I thanked her for braving the elements to journey here, said, true justice is never convenient. I want to acknowledge some of our partners in good trouble in this fight. Senator Cory Booker, our co-lead in the Senate, Chairwoman Yvette Clarke of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, Congresswoman Latifah Simon, Congresswoman Summer Lee, and the more than 70 members of Congress who have signed on to co-sponsor the legislation that was first introduced. And I want to make this point because it is Black History Month. And while there are those that are working actively, either to erase our history or to whitewash it, that I'm here in this moment to pick up the mantle of this historic legislation that has been championed by John Conyers, Congressman John Conyers, Congresswoman.
Before she finishes, I'm sorry, I just have to interject. Who is trying to erase Black history? My question is, first of all, who has that power and ability to erase your history? And two, who are these people? And then specifically, what is the method of action? How are individuals attempting to erase your history? How can you give someone that much power over you that they can just erase your history? I'll tell you what this is. This is called projection. And I'm going to explain how this whole charade of this reparations discussion is projection, because Democrats are the main ones attempting to erase history, notably Black history, and to reimagine and provide a shareable narrative of the history that they want you to remember. Right now she's doing these niceties and she's thanking all these people. I really want to get to the nuts and bolts of what she is about to say, because I really do want to cook on this. But let her finish. But I just wanted to highlight that when she says, people, the they, I'm trying to figure out who they are, who is the they, and how are they trying to erase Black history. I'm curious to know what she means by that. A lot of times these Democrats, particularly the race baiting, race trading, melanated, Marxist-minded Negroes, they will use language, very inflammatory language, in an effort to get you riled up and emotionally just outraged, but they never prove their claims. So she's talking about somebody erasing history, and we're trying to figure out who is she talking about. I don't know who she's talking about.
Jackson Lee. That was introduced more than 30 years ago when Congressman John Conyers was a co-founder of the Congressional Black Caucus. We're at a critical inflection point in America, and the moment cannot be more urgent. With Black history under attack and white supremacy emboldened, there is no better time to introduce this bill than during Black History Month, a time when we reflect on our history, our struggle, and our collective power. And I'll say, it is also not only about Black history, but it is about Black futures. More than 4 centuries ago, Africans were kidnapped, trafficked, and enslaved, forced to build this country under horrific brutality.
Oh, sis, I absolutely agree. So since you are talking about erasing Black history, why don't we remind everyone of the erasure of the facts? So she said they were kidnapped, right? And then brought to this country and required to live under horrific conditions. We agree that that happened. But the Black history that they want to erase is the fact that Africans, right, sold, kidnapped, or through spoils of war, acquired, now there was definitely kidnapping, but they acquired other Africans as slaves and then sold said slaves to the Portuguese and other Europeans who could not come into the interior of the continent. No, they stayed on the coast, and it was called trade. This slavery wasn't on the basis because these people were Black or African. It was the strong conquered the weak. One African tribe happened to have just a little bit more, you know what I'm saying, a little bit more lorries and a little bit zhuzh than a weaker African tribe. That strong African tribe conquered the weaker African tribe, and then the strong tribe, in exchange for weapons and trinkets and coffee, I mean, all sorts of commodities that were valuable to them, they were like, here, you can have these African slaves. And it wasn't on the basis of the fact of ethnicity. Why? Africans selling other Africans or conquering other Africans had nothing to do with race. It wasn't because they were Black, it's because they were weak. And so when the strong Africans sell the weaker Africans to the non-Africans, it was a business transaction. So when you talk about history being erased, talking about people being kidnapped, I'm trying to understand why we not having this press conference over on the Ivory Coast somewhere, over in Ghana, or just in West Africa, appealing to the Africans over there who are absolutely complicit and were the originators of how the transatlantic slave trade came to be. Here's my argument. I'm not trying to absolve the Portuguese or the other European nations that bought those Africans. No, there is fault to go all around. But she's so interested in talking about Black history being erased. Why is it that she never brings up that aspect of Black history? Why is it that she wants to hold America in perpetual condemnation for slavery when they are not the only bad actors in this whole saga? They are not. But it's useful. This narrative is useful for her, and she's allowed to do this because in her mind, this is the one thing that we can get the Black community enraged over, and we can get white people to finally just be quiet and not push back. Because if they push back, we'll call them white supremacists. And the Black people, they're going to accept it. They got to accept that they are victims. But if she actually told the truth about this Black history and explained that there were no victims here, it was just oppressor and oppression narratives, meaning Africans, stronger African tribes conquering weaker African tribes and then selling that weak and trading it with Europeans, and it was a win-win business economic transaction. She don't want to talk about that. Oh no, she don't want to talk about that. But I know she wants to talk a lot about white supremacy. She wants to talk a lot about white supremacy. I'm gonna let her cook some more and get into the knee deep of this reparations argument, but it is time to have an honest discussion about this. And it's also time to highlight how these Democrats, particularly the Congressional Black Caucus Democrats, they don't have anything else. This is a desperate attempt for them to, one, remain relevant, and two, to emotionally manipulate you to make them think that they are actually serious about getting Black folks some reparations. That ain't true. That is not true at all.
We still benefit from today: rice, sugar, tobacco, cotton. And even after the Civil War, emancipation, and the 13th Amendment, the legacy of slavery endured in other forms, codified in law to deny Black Americans freedom, opportunity, and dignity. And
yes.
That's what brings us...
Oh, since we're on that history thing again, we kind of got to talk about it. She states that the impact of slavery, oh no, it did not end with emancipation, but was codified into laws and policies that, what does she say, created systemic racial disparities. She mentions housing and wealth and education and health care, criminal justice, all kinds of other things. And I thought that was so interesting. I said, because you know what? You are right. The part that she just, I don't know why she glimpses over this part of history, is that, ma'am, that was done at the hands of Democrats. It was Democrats who were doing that. Democrats are, have been, and will always be the party of the Confederacy from 1860 to 1865. They have and will always be the party of Jim Crow from 1865 to 1965. And now they are the party of sexual deviancy, illiteracy, keeping these kids dumb and ignorant. They are the party of keeping you poor and dependent on the government. And now they are the party of globalism, open borders. We got to exploit a different people group now because the blacks are onto us. The blacks, right, are onto us, and they know that we just use them, right, for our own selfish gain and to enrich ourselves. So now they got to move the goalposts. She wants to talk about how slavery didn't end with the emancipation, and yet she conveniently leaves out that the very party that she represents right now is the party that was responsible for all of this, I'll say, state-sponsored subjugation, right? The party of the Confederacy, state-sponsored. Jim Crow, absolutely state-sponsored. And so I'm trying to understand, like, you mad at the wrong person. This is an in-house discussion. She should be doing this press conference at the DNC, and she should be having this discussion with the DNC to say, well, what are we going to do? What kind of fundraising efforts is the Democratic National Convention going to put in place so that we can be the first ones to fund an effort to right this wrong? But see, they'll never do that. They'll lie some more, say, oh, well, the party switched. It wasn't the Democrats. The Democrats have been the party of civil rights for over 200 years. How is that possible? How is it possible in 1825 that you was the party of civil rights when you were still fighting to maintain slavery? This country fought itself, blood shed, mono brother against brother, killing themselves over this issue of slavery. And they want to lie and imply that they have been the party of civil rights for over 200 years. Lies, I say.
Today, this brutality, these injustices, these horrors were not things just happened within the culture by osmosis. They were legislated. Today, with Donald Trump and Republicans waging their coordinated and at times unlawful assault on Black folks and Black history, we will not allow that history to be erased. We will not allow
Who's doing that? What laws are being placed on the books that are actually doing this assertion that she makes? I need her to flesh it out. Notice how I told you Democrats would always make these inflammatory, provocative statements, but they never explain what they mean by that. And so I'm wondering if she is implying that because Donald Trump, through executive order, has said we're not doing DEI, okay, we have reached a point in this country where we can actually determine who the best person is for a job or a position or an academic spot based on merit, because we are equal and you are capable of competing based on merit. We're no longer going to employ reverse racism to correct a perceived injustice of racism. We're not doing that. We're not going to correct an injustice with more injustice. I wonder if that's what she means by, saying, Donald Trump and Elon Musk and all these other conservative leaders are working to erase Black history. First of all, why would you give somebody that kind of power? Donald Trump doesn't have the ability to erase my history. It's my history. Now, I find it interesting that you are actually the one that likes to reinvent and reimagine history, because you didn't mention the African slave trade and their complicit behavior in this whole situation of how we got here. But at the end of the day, none of this matters, because what this bill is trying to do, they're trying to document these injustices, and they're using it to provide a foundation for reparative justice. The problem is there is a serious moral and economic dilemma that's going to prevent them from being able to carry this out. So the first thing I wanted to do was notice how this bill, HR40, all it is, it's a larger effort. They're trying to push back against DEI. And not just that, though. This bill is nothing more than a repackaging of what they've already done. They want to study it. They just want to spend more money, more time, and more resources studying how we can possibly make reparations possible. There is no substance behind this bill. These people, all they want to do is figure out a way to siphon more money from the American taxpayer for an alleged social justice cause that is not going to move the goalposts for Black Americans in this country one way or the other. Because until Black America takes a look within and says, I should be doing some basic fundamental things in order to have the upward mobility that other people groups in this country who are not going to have the luxury of some sort of reparative justice done. For example, getting married, staying married, having children in the confines of that marriage, graduating high school, right? Like if you can just do those three, I don't know if that was 3 or 4 basic things, you are well on your way to acquiring the American dream. If we look at Asian households and Indian households and you look at their rate of divorce, it is very, very low. And the reason why they're able in one generation to not just acquire wealth, but then acquire it to where it is generationally transferable is because of family. And if this reparations discussion does not include a conversation about the moral imperative of the Black family needing to be repaired, it is a conversation that is smoke and mirrors, and it is a waste of time because our racial wealth gap, the racial wealth gap can be remedied and addressed very simply by having Black households together, not Black mamas and Black daddies live in separate households with babies out of wedlock. No, I'm talking a man and a woman in a bona fide state of matrimony, and then in the confines of that, bearing children, right? Bearing children and then working together to educate those children, to prepare those children for life outside of the home when they reach adulthood. And then those two working together, they acquire real estate, they acquire other assets, because remember, it's not these disjointed households all over the place. They are working it together. They are forbearing with one another. They are operating and recognizing that there is a duty and a responsibility and a generational loyalty that is counting on us making this work. So we got to figure it out. It includes our women not delaying marriage and motherhood in lieu of chasing the bag by themselves to now where they're competing with their own men, thinking they're better than their own men, and then refusing to hold traditional views of marriage and family. That's what's hurting us more than anything. This racial wealth gap with Black households, that is one reason why we are holding significantly less wealth than our white households. It's not this direct result of slavery that these people want to point to or these discriminatory policies. You know why? Because the Black family, when we were intact, we were doing better and we were inching our way out of poverty in one generation. But the moment that the welfare state came in and convinced our women that marriage was oppressive and that having children was just holding you back, what did you start to see? You started to see the breakdown of the family, our divorce rates go up, single motherhood shoots up, and government and welfare dependence became the conversation of the day. It was a phenomenon. No one had ever seen a people group function this way. And Patrick Moynihan is like, we got to do something about this. If we don't step in and do something, we're going to have it's already a crisis mode. So the argument that if the government could provide reparations for, the Japanese after internment and then give the Native Americans, based on their claims, give them something, what about us? My question is, when are we going to have a conversation about the Homestead Acts right after slavery, where the Republican Party and the federal government were like, listen, y'all trying to stay and coexist with these racist white folks down in the South, it ain't worth it. Why don't you go out west, establish a settlement for yourself, we'll give you some land, and if you can work that land for 5 years, it is yours. You ain't got to worry about these racist white folks no more. We didn't do it. Why? Because just like Ayanna Pressley is standing there as a proud Democrat, right, proudly representing her Confederate history, you had Black folks back then who were more content staying on the plantation with massa, where it was convenient and comfortable and safe, than to have to go out in that big, mean, bad world and find a way or make a way on their own. Less than 5,000 Black Americans took the federal government up on that offer in that Homestead Act. And we didn't have just one Homestead Act. We had two. In fact, let me go and pull it up. Y'all need some history today. Since you want to talk about Black history, Ayanna Pressley, I got your Black history. Let's go ahead and deal with these Homestead Acts, because there were more than one of them. You had two. The first Homestead Act, we definitely had one in 1866, but there was another one. President Lincoln, on May 20th of 1862, there was a significant piece of legislation that aimed at encouraging westward expansion to settlers. Now, here is what was included. If you were a citizen, including former Black slaves after the Civil War, you could lay claim to 160 acres of federal land. You were required to build a dwelling and farm that land for 5 continuous years, and then you gain ownership. To be eligible at first, it was limited to U.S. citizens or those intending to become citizens, but it also included freed Black Americans after the 14th Amendment in 1868. So by the end of the Civil War, freedmen were explicitly included. Participants were required to pay a small registration fee and show evidence of their improvements to the land. That was Reparations 1.0. Reparations 1.0. Then, let me tell you something else significant about it. The significant homesteading occurred in the Midwest, i.e. Kansas, Nebraska, parts of Texas, as well as other Western territories. The Freedmen's Bureau, which established post-Civil War, they were formed to assist these freed slaves and to help them to navigate the land acquisition under this act, the Freedmen's Bureau. So my question is, you spending all this time doing a study, trying to study reparations, and you keep talking about, they want to erase our history. Well, what about this history, Ayanna? No one's trying to erase this, but I've never heard you make this argument. Like, this would be my rebuttal. If I were a Republican legislator, white or Black, I don't care the ethnicity, this would be my argument to say, listen, I understand it is important to the Democrats to continue to re-adjudicate this matter, to continue to keep the grievances of this nation's sinful past always on the forefront of everybody's mind. But here is why. Their condemnation no longer has any power here. This is what the federal government did distinctly and specifically for Black people right after the Civil War. And it is not our fault that only a small amount of Black Americans took advantage of it. For the ones that did, we celebrate them. But for the ones that did it in 2025, we are not going to keep relitigating this matter by studying using taxpayer money and in a wasteful way to study reparations. And then I would call out and argue and say the Democrats are a one-trick pony. They have nothing else. They are really not interested in the upward mobility and the social or economic improvement of Black Americans in this country. Because if they did, they would tell them the truth about if you don't repair the Black family, there's no amount of money that we can give you that's going to improve your station in life. I would say it, drop the mic, and then walk off, go sit down and dare the Democrats to rebut that argument. But they can't rebut the argument. And then I would hold them accountable and say, since it was the Democrats that actively fought against reparations, against freeing the slaves, since the Democrats were the actual ones who codified into law this subjugation and oppression, i.e. Jim Crow, I think we should step up to the plate as the DNC and come up with, I don't care if you got to do a GoFundMe, you raise money for everything else, raise some money for that. If you actually were serious about reparations, the Democrats would take a look within and say, we owe it. We were the ones who refused to let these Black Americans function in their freedom, and it's our fault, so we're going to pay. But I've never seen anyone ask the Democrats for reparations, and I sure ain't never seen the Democrat take their old little rusty behinds over to Africa and demand reparations from those tribes that sold other Africans to the Europeans. When we going to have that conversation? So miss me, Ayanna, with your performative antics and your crying in the spirit, Sheila Jackson Lee, I'm carrying on this work. She was a grifter. You and your milk dud looking head over there is a grifter. All of y'all are full of crap. And Black Americans who are very much aware and are awoke and who understand that there is nobody superior to me. I dare you to point out a white person that's superior to me. You're the ones who have the inferiority complex. You're the ones that are constantly outraged and obsessed with how white people see you and how white people feel about you. Go wear a helmet since you're just this emotionally stunted and unable to figure out how to function in this world unless white people, the whiteness and white supremacy and white people are on the forefront of your mind. So no, I wouldn't buy into this. Matter of fact, it doesn't even make sense for me to play the rest of this darn press conference because this is just a charade. It's a clown show. These people ain't got no intention on doing reparations. And if you are for reparations, I would like to have a substantive discussion as to why. There were several opportunities for us to have reparations. Unfortunately, many of our forefathers did not take advantage of it. We cannot continue to relitigate this and to hold white America in perpetual condemnation for slavery. At some point, you got to find a way or make a way. Because there is nothing is you're not encumbered today because one of your forefathers, your ancestors, was a slave, and that's why you can't figure out how to find your place in the world. You have no intimate connection as to what it feels like to be a slave, except for being an ideological one. And for that, I do have pity on you. I do have pity on the ones that believe they need DEI. I do have pity on the ones who are constantly obsessed with what white people think about them because their self-worth is so low. and their lack of identity prevents them from moving forward in this world. And it is sad to watch. I actually agree with you. You are the victims. And as long as America continues to give you a front seat into the theater where you can act out all of your grievance of victimhood, we are never going to be able to move on. But I'm not giving you an audience. I'll just continue to call it out. Let me finish. There was another Homestead Act. This one was 1866. And this act aimed to provide land to impoverished tenant farmers and sharecroppers, both black and white, in the southern United States during Reconstruction. By offering land at low prices, it sought to alleviate poverty among the working class and promote land ownership. So this is another act by the federal government recognizing that, think about it, there weren't just blacks who suffered during the Civil War. You had poor whites who didn't really have any skills either. They like, all right, well, what we gonna do? Here's another Homestead Act. Initially, only freedmen, formerly enslaved individuals, and white unionists were permitted to access these lands until January 1st of 1867. After this period, the lands became available to other applicants. So look at here. Here they are prioritizing the former slave. The former slave was prioritized in 1867. And then it wasn't until then, those, y'all service, okay, now we're going to open it up. Here's your reparations right here. Requirements. Applicants could claim parcels of 80 acres. Well, look at that. That's more than 40 acres and a mule. That's twice as much. 80 acres. Then it was later increased to 160 acres. And you were required to occupy and improve the land for 5 years to gain full ownership. The only challenge that prevented this from becoming a reality for more black folks is the same challenge that prevents a lot of black Americans from making this a reality for themselves today. Cowardice. Cowardice and being afraid. Let me explain. Many applicants, especially freedmen, were allowed whites to intimidate them, right? Local resistance hindered black applicants from successfully claiming and retaining the land. So instead of exercising your Second Amendment right by saying, oh no, I'm about to go reclaim what's mine, and if you get in my way, I'm gonna bust a cap in your behind, they allowed the same cowardice that kept many of them from actually fighting for their freedom. It took away the opportunity. Who said that this was going to be easy? No one has ever argued that the road is supposed to be easy. Nothing worth having is easy. But the question is, how bad do you want it? How bad you want to fight for it? I know y'all don't like this kind of talk, because what it does is it forces you to take a look within and be like, you know what? We keep asking for them to study this when it's been studied. It's been studied, and the reason why we just didn't get it is because we didn't accept the help that was offered, and we didn't want it bad enough. Listen to this. As a result of this act, it wasn't as effective as intended. Approximately 6,500 African Americans applied for homesteads under the act, but only 1,000 received property certificates. Are we going to re-adjudicate why that was? If you don't fight for what is rightfully yours and you let somebody come and take it, the strong always conquer the weak. The strong always conquer the weak. My argument is that we can't say that America has not done enough. The argument now is, when will it ever be enough? And the answer to that, according to MLK and all of the Marxist-minded people who think just like them, they ain't gonna never be satisfied. They'll never be satisfied because their satisfaction is always in what someone else can do for them, not what they can do for themselves, and then being content with their own achievements and what God has purposed in their hand and set forth to do. That's why they'll never be satisfied. That's why stupid press conferences like this gonna continue to happen, and black folks are still gonna be hoping that, like, the amount of energy that black people are spending hoping and wishing that a reparations act actually gets passed, the amount of dollars and time lost in productivity, it's just wasted because you're waiting for someone else to give you something versus what am I gifted and equipped to do? And with the time that I have allotted and afforded to me, how am I going to be useful? And I'd be waiting for someone to create an opportunity for me, but that I bust the door in and kick open and make opportunities for myself. There are many of us in America doing that just fine. And you will never hear us begging and whining and crying, saying America owes reparations, and we just can't wait for the day when we get it. How weak. Oh, how weak. I feel sorry for people who think like this. I really do. And it is my prayer that more Black Americans will hear the words that I'm saying and say, you know what, she do got a point. What else does America need to do? At what point, when are we going to get our own house in order? Clean up our family, strengthen our family, put God first, not government, and then trust God with the rest. When are we going to do that? I don't know. I'm just a chick on the internet with a biblical worldview who refuses to be begging the government to give me something that is already rightfully mine. But I am curious to know what you guys think. You guys, let me know in the comments below. Is this charade of a press conference trying to get HB40 back on the forefront again? Is this an act? Do the Democrats actually have well-intentioned? Are they well-intentioned with wanting to give Black Americans reparations? Or is this all that they have and they do this for attention? Because they figure if we could just keep the grievance going, we'll continue to be relevant and we can use it to run on and people will continue to vote for us because they're like, they still fighting for reparations. So they need another term, right? She's carrying on the work of Sheila Jackson Lee, a don't do nothing Democrat in Congress, and now I'm carrying on the work as a bald-headed do nothing Democrat. Man, y'all, please. Anyway, until next time, you guys, grace and peace.